Hey everybody, and welcome to DocTalk. I'm Dr. Erin Knopf. Dr. Kareen Hannon is out this week, but I am joined by a very, very special guest. Jane Reagan is joining us today to talk a little bit more about the Eating Disorder Recovery Roadmap for Parents program that she offers. Jane, I'm so delighted to have you here and to have people hear directly from you how incredibly important it is to learn in an intentional way how to support a loved one going through a recovery journey. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I am thrilled that all that you're doing in the community to help people and to help parents and to help all those struggling with eating disorders. And we're also appreciative of all your efforts.
Thank you. Thank you. So, first, tell us a little bit about yourself and why it was important for you to create a program to instruct and inform parents through this
Yeah,
process.
yeah. So again, my name is Jane Reagan, and I'm a eating disorder specialist. I'm a registered dietitian. I have my degree in counseling. I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I've been in the field for probably 15 years. Um, I have been in private practice for that long. I also worked at the University of Colorado at Boulder for 10 years, where I helped start their eating disorders team. And as many of your listeners know, there is a large number of eating disorders at college campuses across the United States, but there's definitely a big amount at our college here and in Boulder. And so I got to see firsthand for so many years how obviously people are impacted who have eating disorders, but also their caregivers, mainly their parents.
Yeah.
And I saw how much parents suffered and struggled and the despair that they felt. And I saw how some parents were able to navigate that recovery road with their child and really help their child move more quickly
Yeah.
towards recovery. And some parents, actually, their actions and words and behaviors made things worse for their child. Um,
Yikes.
and
Yeah.
while I was at CU, I actually had the lived experience of having a child who was struggling. And so from that experience, I had a different lens, not as the provider, but
Mm,
as the parent. And it is a really different lens to look through. Like, how do you help your
totally.
child who has an eating disorder or is struggling with disordered eating? And what I realized very quickly is that there's not a lot of help for parents out there. And parents are busy. Parents have other children and one job, two jobs,
Yeah.
ailing parents. They've got all these stressors going on, and they don't have the time or necessarily the knowledge to understand the complexity. And I'm sure you would, say the same thing, the extreme complexity of eating disorders. So because of that, I just felt like I wanted to help parents more. I'm a parent of four kids, and being a parent is challenging. And adding, an eating disorder onto a parent's role is even more challenging. And so I developed an online 8-week pre-recorded self-paced program for parents that they can join. And not only do they get the 8 weeks of modules that are 30 to or 60 to 90 minutes long on all different aspects of eating disorders, so they can become educated and understand how they can be an ally for their child. But there's also a
Mm,
module on eating disorders in college, since it is such a typical time when kids develop eating disorders. And
totally.
with this program, parents also get 4 months of live weekly Q&As where we all come together. And it's really exciting. We had one this morning where there's
Mm,
parents from New York and Maine and Minnesota and New Mexico and California and Colorado, and we all hop on and they're able to support one another, which is what's really missing for parents out there. They feel isolated and they feel
yeah.
scared. And then lastly, there's about 50 handouts that come with it that help reinforce all of the things that I want parents to better understand about how to support their child.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, if anything, you've said before that historically parents were always in the background in treatment
Mhm.
plans. And, even with FBT becoming the gold standard for adolescent treatment, it still didn't always prepare parents for the vast requirements to hold space for this complex illness. It's not just about the food and preparing the food and serving the food and monitoring the food. There's so many more other layers to it, as you said. The nuance is so important.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there can be so many behaviors and thoughts, right, that parents don't realize are going through their kids' head. Like, parents will say to me, "But my child seems like a normal weight. Aren't they fine?" Right? And but they don't see everything that's underneath that. And so many people who struggle with an eating disorder are at what's considered a normal average weight. but that doesn't
Yeah,
mean they don't have an eating disorder. And so helping parents
totally.
to understand kind of what I call the many faces of an eating disorder. And it can look so different, and it can even look different, from child to child within the same family or the same age or the same college. And so really
Yeah,
understanding, I think you said, the nuances of what are the contributing factors. Like, we know there's not one cause of an eating disorder, but there are many contributing factors. And like, what is it for your child that is really playing the biggest role? And that's what I found with so many of the kids that I work with and their parents, is that sometimes it was social media that was really, taking their child down.
yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
it was inaccurate nutrition information, right? And they were following down the rabbit hole of all this, horrible nutrition
Mm,
stuff that wasn't true. Or sometimes it was their own personality traits, their own like compulsive way of thinking. Sometimes it was
yeah.
genetics.
Sticky buttons.
Yeah. Sometimes it was peer pressure, right? Or like the pressure of being on a sports team and
Mm,
expectations and coaches. And sometimes it was family environment, or there could have been a change, or sometimes there's a divorce in a family, or a death, or
yeah,
so they have to move, or there's this big change that has sparked off, right, this eating disorder. And parents will think, well, if they could just eat normally, it will be fine, or this is just about the food. And of course it is
yeah,
about the food, but it's really not about the food. Which
totally.
what makes this so challenging is that someone recovering from eating disorder has to really learn how to have a good balanced relationship with food. And it's not like other situations like with alcohol or drugs where you can just, do away with it. You have to learn actually how
Yeah.
to eat it regularly throughout the day, right? And how to address and challenge your thoughts and feelings about food and exercise and body image.
Yeah, and value. Like, what is your value as it relates to those concepts? I love that you touched on like two really key things that I think of, as a clinician in this field. One, the concept that you can't diagnose an eating disorder with your eyeballs. It really is about what you said, the behaviors, the beliefs, the motivations around body, food, exercise, etc. But then also how individual it needs to be. Your child or your loved one going through an eating disorder is uniquely them. And yes, they may share features with other individuals. That's why there are standard criteria. But ultimately, every single individual has their own story of how they got there. And it's so important as the parent is learning to be the ally in this program to see their child as a unique individual worthy of that cultivation and nurturing around their uniqueness.
Yeah. And when you talk about value, one of the things that we touch on in my classes or in my course is what is their why for recovery,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
Like, what
purpose
is,
they're working towards.
yeah, because when it gets hard, when they have to not use a behavior, change a thought, right? It's easy to give in and just say, oh, it's easier to just go with what I know and what I feel comfortable with. So there's got to be a good why for recovery,
Totally.
right? And to have those authentic, honest conversations with your child, like the parent can really make a significant difference. And I had one of my clients, every night she started taking a walk with her mom and dad after dinner, and at first they were kind of uncomfortable, and after,
Mm,
over time, it became such a cherished time. And there were so many wonderful nuggets that they would get of insights, and like even their parents sharing like what it was like for them growing up and what are the stressors that
mm,
they felt, and how does diet culture impact them at their age versus their child's age, because parents are impacted too by all of this
yeah.
that's out there. And just so
Yes.
that the child is not alone, right? It might be different, but just having that commonality and being able to talk about it, and without the parent wanting to fix it, right? Like as parents, we
Mm,
often feel like we don't want our kids to suffer, let me just make it better for you, let me fix it for you. But what kids really need is just to be heard and to be understood and to be seen, right? And
yes.
which
Yes.
helps them feel valued, and to start to build that trust again that they need, that trust with food, that trust with their body, right? That everything's going to be okay. Because what I see is, as in recovery, as we pull away the layers of like what is at the foundation, the heart of like an eating disorder, I often see for kids is that they don't feel like they're enough. They don't feel like they're okay.
Yeah.
They're not good enough.
Yeah.
They're not valued. And so having their parents value them, no matter what they're saying, no matter what they're doing, right? And having that connection can be transformative.
Totally. I actually try to remind parents that this isn't much different than when you're raising toddlers. Ultimately, you're going to be kind, compassionate, available, and you're going to hold boundaries, and you're not going to accommodate the tantrum or the distress that your kiddo has when they don't get something they really want in that moment. I happen to have two young children, so I get to practice this every day with my almost 5 and almost 3 year old. But it's really no different when your teenager or even your young adult child is going through eating disorder treatment.
Yes.
They are going to have irrational emotions around irrational needs. And it's okay to say, I hear you. I get that this is important for you. And this is really important for your overall well-being and, preventing further issues in your disorder. That's why we're going to stick to the plan. So meeting their expectations, even when they push back, not being afraid of their big emotions, that alone is how you show that unconditional love for the person in front of you.
It's so hard to keep that calm, centered. Like I think we've talked about, if I had to give any word to a parent, right, for them to embrace during this process, it's patience, right?
Yes.
Patience and not reacting. It's kind of like when you have a toddler, right? If they're screaming at you and you start screaming at them, it doesn't
No one's
improve
happy.
the
Yeah.
situation at all. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
like
so,
patience, grace, and space together, recognizing you're not going to be perfect for each other. Your child is not going to show up perfectly in their recovery journey. You're not going to show up perfectly as the parent. And that's enough, though. That's okay. It's okay to say we need a do-over. It's okay to say I didn't handle that as well as I want to. I want to do it
yes.
better next time. To have that conversation even with your kiddo, no matter their age, I think is
And
really helpful.
And I've had parents say, "Oh, I made the biggest mistake. I said this, I did this." And it's okay. Like we're all human, right? And I think our kids appreciate it much more when we go, "You know what? I thought back to what I said to you and I'm so sorry. Like I can imagine that that didn't sound the way I meant it to sound, or let them know like authentically how you're feeling. And it's a much better way to build communication that
Yeah.
way and much
Yeah.
more helpful for your child to let you they're going to be more willing to let you in if they feel like you're really vulnerable and authentic.
Yeah. And also the way you communicate your own emotions with your kiddo and how you help narrate their emotional experience is how they will internalize it for themselves. So if you show you are safe to make mistakes, you are still loved, and you can still be loving or lovable, through mistakes, that actually helps encourage better mental health for your kiddo as a whole. So if anything, I love that you brought up, the biggest advice you give parents is patience. And I love from your program that it's not just about educating yourself more about eating disorders and what to say, what not to say, how to really get to the nuts and bolts of it, but also it offers that support because parents do need their own support when they are trying to help their kiddo go through an eating disorder journey. What is your, typical recommendation to parents when you first meet with them and that maybe they don't have a therapist, maybe they are completely psycho naive? Like, how do you guide them in finding that support?
Okay, well there's several different pieces to this answer. One is it's so important for parents to get their own support. Because what I often see is there have been behaviors that may have been passed down through generations around food, or how we relate with food, maybe even around
Yeah,
exercise, body image, what we say, the words we use. We use them because our parents
totally.
use them, because their parents use them. And so to get your own support, because you may notice that there's things that come up that even trigger parents around, oh gosh, I do that, or I say that, or was that an
Yeah.
issue? I didn't know that that was a
My
problem.
own anti-fatness, in my belief patterns. Do I
Mhm.
moralize body sizes too?
Right. I kind of talk about the ways sometimes parents unintentionally teach, right? Because intentionally, as a parent, we want to give our child our best. And sometimes just through learned behavior, we might say something or do something and not realize that it impacts our
Totally.
child. So we start learning about ourselves. And so there's a real exploration for parents to go through. And so getting their own support, either through a therapist, a friend, a group, um, and and that's why one of the reasons I created this program too, so they could understand some of this, and be able to apply it with their child. But also throughout the course, I really recommend that they take time away, um, take
Mm,
time for themselves, really
self-care,
have
recharge.
time for healing and self-care if they need it. So that's one of the things I would say, right? Is that parents really need to take care of themselves and then really try to educate as much as they can about eating disorders because they're complex. I mean, we've been in the field for many years and it's still complicated. So, right, for
Hmm.
somebody who's new, it's a lot. And so try to take stock in your child's reality, understand
Yeah.
what are the things that are really challenging, because it's not surprising for parents to say to me like, oh, I really thought it was this that they were struggling with, but it's actually that.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of awestruck a little bit. Or
Yeah.
I didn't know that this was such a problem. They act like everything's fine. I didn't know that they were thinking about this all the time. And so starting to listen carefully to what your child is saying, right? And the words that aren't being said, um, and watching their behaviors and what they're doing. And not only just with food, but just, with friends, with school, teachers, coaches, wherever they may be, after school activities, like
Yeah.
really hone in on what's going on with them. Um, and then it's kind of going down that road of recovery. And
Yeah.
it is a process, right? There's not really that one destination where like, okay, it's a lab result, and when you get these labs,
Yeah.
you're fine. It's
There's
not.
a finish line. We must cross the finish line. No.
Right. And so recovery is a process. And for parents, that's the other part of patience, is that I typically don't see that
Mm,
this is figured out in a month or two, right? Let's give it a year, and let's even maybe give it longer. And for some people, it's even longer than that.
totally.
But it is a long process because there are so many moving parts, and
Yeah.
environment being such a big part of it, and the culture that we live in.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'll have kids and parents where we talk about a certain topic and reframing our thoughts around something, but they go out into their environment at school or what they read or social media, and all of it's wiped away.
Yeah.
Um,
It's really, honestly, I think that's one of the biggest challenges for even us clinicians is how do we guide people through that paradigm shift? How do we help them find strength and resilience in their own individual life journey and around what we, help construct as guidelines and bumpers on a bowling alley for that, only to have it be completely refuted by the public at large? How do you really explain that discrepancy and also help them feel empowered and confident in, but this is right for my child or my recovery journey?
well, okay, so I could use nutrition as an example for that,
Yes,
because
please.
you take, carbohydrates, for example. You will have
Yes.
research studies on both ends, right, that say why it's good to have it regularly, why you shouldn't have very many carbohydrates, or why grains are bad, or why you should be eating
Totally.
like a carnivore diet, or, so how do you find your way when there's all this conflicting information? And in regards to nutrition, I have people come in and throw up their hands and go, I don't even know what to eat anymore because it's just
Right.
so confusing out there.
Yeah.
And when you think back in regards to nutrition, when our kids were little, how did they know what to eat? How did they know when they were hungry, when they were full, right? What they felt
Mm,
like eating. And if you think back to when you had your child as a baby, right? If they're having a bottle, or like, they turn their head when they're not hungry, like, right? They keep crying if they want more. And where does that come from? It's intrinsic, like it's built in. And so
yeah.
we know how to eat. We know how to listen to hunger and fullness. But over time, we get away from that and we start
Yeah.
thinking too much, like, oh, I can't eat because it's 12, not 12 o'clock yet. Or let me see, it has to have this many grams of this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
And 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 we learn to not trust ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the process of recovery, and I don't know if we're getting off track a little bit, is re-engaging that trust with our body and honoring it. Like, it's so if if you're hungry, it's okay to eat, even if it's not 12
Yes.
o'clock yet. It's not lunchtime. Um,
Yes.
because if you were a kid, you would do that. Like if your kids
Yes.
come in from playing outside, like the age your kids are, if they're hungry and they want more of a snack, they'll eat more. And if they want less,
Yes.
they won't eat as much. And no one tells them that, right? They know how to do that. And so it's
Totally.
really like a reclaiming who they are and honoring it and trusting it. But
Yeah.
our society does not perpetuate that, right? It's almost like this distrust. Like you should do it
Hmm.
this way. And you see on TikTok what I ate in a day and, what exercise I'm doing. And then we have all these kids following this as if that's the way rather than listening to what
Yeah.
works for them.
Well, I think you bring up a great point too. Kids take on adult decisions around nutrition in ways that is not appropriate for their bodies as far as they are developing. They actually should never be on a weight loss diet because that actually will interfere with their entire development system and can impact their brain development and their growth potential. So there's this adultification of information that also happens, and then it gets practiced by well-meaning providers too. Let me name that. And I think that is really hard to help families navigate that. Just because you decided this for yourself as a fully developed, grown adult doesn't mean this is
Right.
something that is healthy for your child to have the same construct around nutrition. I mean, at the end of the day, the number one thing I remind everyone of is the root of binge eating is actually restriction. If you want your kid to have a healthy relationship with all foods and to
Yep.
not find themselves binge eating candy when they are adults, don't limit candy as far as like it's off limits or it's only a treat. Be really mindful of that language that you use with your
Yes.
kids so that they know I can have candy. It's always available. If I have an abundancy mindset, I'm not going to covet it and hoard it. And that's why so many adults are still struggling because that is what happened to them. So it's okay if we look at our system at play and say, we can do it differently and probably better. And that doesn't mean it was anyone's fault before. We don't want to
Right.
point fingers and blame. It's just simply let's make a intentional decision to change.
Right. I see so many food rules that are created in families, and that
Yeah.
may have been passed down. There was a generation where you needed to clean everything on your plate because,
Oh my gosh,
we
yes.
don't quite know where the next meal or how much is coming, or right. There was a value there. And so
Totally.
these beliefs are passed down. But when I see a lot of food rules, there's no way that kids can't be impacted. Even if words aren't spoken, actions speak louder than words. and
Mm-hmm.
and so I've seen parents where one parent is on one diet, another parent's on another diet, and the kid is confused about what to eat. And even though all food may be available to them, they see what mom's doing, what dad's doing, and like, should I do that, or maybe I
Right? Am
shouldn't?
I good or bad if I don't?
Hmm. Hmm. And so, and this is where parents don't always realize what they're doing. Their kids are watching. They are,
Yeah.
and they're like little sponges, and they absorb so much all throughout their years, even in their high school
Totally.
years, and so trying to create, in regards to this example, a way of eating where there's balance, right? As far as allowing for all foods, unless someone has a true food allergy, then they actually have to keep it out, but that
Yeah.
all foods are allowable, right? And all times of days, like you don't have to stop eating right at 7 o'clock at night, right? Or like whatever the time frame is, or you can only eat starting at 12. I
Correct.
think this is where there might be some people that could do that type of eating and come away and be fine, and then have kind of a normal relationship with food. But many people go on diets, whether it's time restricted, food restricted, calorie restricted, and they just go down into the rabbit hole. And we know that dieting is one of the main, things that leads to an eating disorder. And when you think of how many
Yeah.
people are dieting in our culture, then we potentially have a huge problem.
Yeah, I think the current statistics are 50% of adults are on a diet at any given time. 35% of people who engage in dieting will develop pathological dieting, which, disordered eating might as well be called subclinical eating disorder or early stage eating disorder.
Mhm.
And then 20 to 25% of those will develop full clinical eating disorders because it is a matter of having a predisposition. There are, nature nurture contributions here to the development of an eating disorder. And I'm going way off on another tangent here.
Well,
But yeah, like it's important that people know just because you were able to do a diet and not suffer long term consequences and be rigid in your food thinking doesn't mean your child can.
Correct. And where you said that statistic of 50%, when you get to the college setting, it's actually the statistics I've heard of
Oh, I'm
are
sure.
much, much greater.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right.
So many pressures.
So we have a population, right, an age group where they're really at risk for developing an eating disorder. And yeah, it can be really scary.
I had a sneeze coming, so I was trying to prepare to not totally blow everyone's eardrums with my sneeze. Well, with the time we have left, let's kind of summarize again, I guess the big points to take away if you're someone supporting someone going through an eating disorder. And yes, we focus more on parents today because those are usually the first supporters to show up. If you're watching this and you are a friend, sibling, spouse, know that these concepts are actually the same for you as well. It's just a different relationship, a different way you show up for that person. But number one, educate. Just educate yourself. No more. Yeah. Number two, audit yourself as far as really take stock of who you are in your world. What beliefs and patterns have you inadvertently demonstrated and, might need to readdress for your child's needs? I often give parents the analogy, if a parent was a smoker back in the day, that just was what it was. But if they found out their kid had asthma, they usually quit smoking because they knew that would be really bad for their child and cause an asthma exacerbation. So it's okay to change your own habits and behaviors if you find out your child will benefit from that. And then find your own support. I love that. Like, take your own space. It's like the oxygen mask analogy. You have to put
Yep.
your oxygen mask on first before you can be available for someone else, and then celebrate the process. And so I wonder if, with our last few minutes, can you talk a little bit more about really finding that flexibility and joy and celebrate the process for all of its accomplishments, even if they don't look like the more concrete
Yeah.
accomplishment someone might be seeking?
But just to celebrate those small steps, those aha moments. And with my
Mm,
parent classes that I do where we're all online doing the Q&A, we share our wins and the challenges and just the little things where parents will feel just so much joy from the smallest little things, right? That are really big things. And then sometimes it's a setback, like that game Shoots and Ladders, or like where you go up and
yeah,
all of a sudden you come down and then you're going up. And that's a little bit how recovery is. But the I don't, no, not relapses, but the setbacks, right, are actually wonderful learning opportunities, right? That then can springboard your child, and you together, so I would say, don't get discouraged by the setbacks. They're just more information, more learning, and that, I'm sure you've used this analogy many times where it's not a straight line to recovery. There's, it's zigging, zagging, and up and down and back, and that you're with your child, that you're there with
mm,
them. And, I would say love your child, be there, support them, have them know that no matter if they're falling backwards or they're moving forwards, that you're there, not just when they're moving forward, but when they're
yeah,
struggling too. And then they'll start to feel like the safety, right? And to be able to develop the trust to really move towards recovery. Because I think it's much easier for kids when their parents are on board and they support
yeah,
them and they understand what they're going
yeah,
through, and they talk about it and they, reinforce all that they're doing. And so in that light, parents can make such a huge difference. And I've seen it over and over again. The kids, even in my office, will tell me, oh, my dad is talking differently to me, or my mom is doing this different. And it
yeah.
really helps me, and so I will tell you firsthand, it makes a difference when parents change.
It's very exciting what you're doing. It's so inspiring, and I hope more people take advantage of our community discount to join this program. So check out more information on the Eating Disorder Recovery Roadmap for Parents program in the supporter channel. If you're watching this as a member, the link will also be available in the event description once we save the Doc Talk to the community. Thank you so much for joining, Jane. This is just
Yes.
lovely. I love spending the afternoon with you right now.
Oh, thank you so
Um,
much. Thank you for all you do.
Oh my gosh, it's a group effort, right? It takes a
Yep.
village. So I'm Dr. Erin Knopf. This is Doc Talk, and join us next week.
Okay.
Bye.